At some point, the Memphis Grizzlies and Ja Morant need to part ways. Whether it's by this year's trade deadline, over the summer, the relationship has run its course. But who would be interested in him? Well, according to Sam Amick, there are a couple of teams that are already keeping a close eye, and I've worked up a few trades that could send Ja out of Memphis. I'm Trevor Lane. This is the Basketball Bulletin. Make sure you subscribe right here to the channel. I say it all the time, but 70% of you are not subscribed. Let's fix that. Hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. So this is Sam Amick from The Athletic, mentioning that the Minnesota Timberwolves are a team that is keeping a close eye on the Ja Morant situation, monitoring the situation is the language that's being used right now, as well as, because of course, the Sacramento Kings. God, it would be such a Kings move to go trade for Ja Morant. What are you doing, Sacramento? But we'll get into what these trades could look like with both those teams. The Houston Rockets, another team that needs a point guard, unlikely to pursue him. That's not just them, I don't think Ja is a great fit in Houston, but beyond that, there's salary concerns there, as you're going to have to pay Amen Thompson. You just gave Kevin Durant a big deal. You got to figure out what you're going to do with Tari Eason. You've got some other priorities with your salary. So I understand not wanting to take on a big salary like Ja Morant, especially given what you'd have to give up in order to get him. But Sacramento and Minnesota. Could Minnesota be a landing spot for him? So Minnesota, the thought process is this, and as Amick lays out, that we've seen this story play out, right? Where a star player mentions something publicly about their team, the team suspends him, the team reprimands him, the player says everything's fine, the team says everything's fine, and then something pops up again, the team's not playing well, the player's numbers are down, and eventually it ends in a breakup, right? Whether or not it's a messy one, typically we do see a separation there. And Ja Morant's numbers are indeed certainly down this year. Doesn't seem to be playing with a lot of joy. Ja taking a page from Jimmy Butler there. 20 points per game this season, 7.1 assists. Minutes, a career low, 29.4. Thomas Isalo, the coach of the Grizzlies, is running a style that involves a lot of substitutions and trying to keep players fresh on the floor and play this high-energy, aggressive play style. Ja Morant's not with that. He wants to be the star, the guy that's on the floor all the time. Look at his field goal percentage, a career low, 39%. And his three-point percentage is an abominable 14%. I'm rounding up to get there from three right now. Is he really that bad of a three-point shooter? No, I think that we will see that number go back to normal at some point. But my God, what an awful start to the season for Ja Morant. So let's say the Grizzlies decide, you know what, tonight it is now time to get out of the Ja Morant business. Minnesota is lacking a point guard right now. Mike Conley getting older. Dillingham just not quite ready to take over just yet. So could you do something like this if you are the Wolves? By the way, I would not personally. But the Wolves, it's tricky trying to make the math work to get Ja Morant to Minnesota because they don't have a lot of salaries that really work to stack up and get there. If I'm Memphis, I would do this immediately. Julius Randle is the more versatile reincarnation of former Grizzly Zach Randolph and would give you an immediate kind of grit, grind, tough mentality player that fits in so well with Memphis. Ditto Dante DiVincenzo, who I think would fit excellently in Memphis, in their system, with their play style. He'd be great. Do the Wolves really want to give up everything they got in the Karl Anthony Towns trade in Randle and DiVincenzo in exchange for Ja Morant? No, they shouldn't. I know they need a point guard, but this is not a move the Wolves should make. I don't think they would make it, but this is just if the Wolves really want to get into the mix for Ja Morant, maybe something they'd have to consider. Your other salaries you could put in. And by the way, this is not something they can do immediately. I had to turn off trade restrictions. They got to wait till later in the season, December 15th, for Julius Randle to become trade eligible. Naz Reid is a January 15th trade eligibility guy. But you could swap out some players here. But the bottom line is, in order to make a Ja Morant trade actually work, and these are workable here on Spot Track, you have to give up some pieces that you may not want to. Now, if you are the Wolves, the ideal would be to do something involving, let's call it, Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley. If you could do that, if you could do Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley to Memphis. Now, there's not a lot of draft capital for the Wolves. That's a challenge too. When you look at their future draft capital, there's not a whole lot of it that's available to them. They've traded away a lot of their future draft capital, so that becomes a bit of a challenge. But would you trade Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley to go get Ja Morant? Now that to me becomes more interesting for the Wolves. If I am the Grizzlies, though, I want no part of that. Could you split the difference and do something involving Rudy Gobert and and Gobert? He might be washed. I don't know. He might be washed. But could you do Dante DiVincenzo and Rudy Gobert? Could you do something like that rather than Randall? I would rather hang on to Randall if I am the Wolves over Gobert. But if you're the Grizzlies, do you even want Gobert to begin with? And one of the things to keep in mind when we're looking at potentially moving Ja Morant, the Grizzlies have not gotten their lease situation figured out with FedEx Forum yet. It is up in 2029. And there are rumors of relocation. I talked about it yesterday, but I mean, moving across the state to Nashville has got to be looking pretty good to them. Maybe they could be the club that winds up moving to Seattle. Maybe they can be the club that winds up moving to Las Vegas. It's something to keep an eye on. It's nothing. A lot of teams get in this situation. It's nothing until it's something. Let's put it that way. I wouldn't just assume the Grizzlies are leaving Memphis or anything like that. They've been there for a long time. Wouldn't assume that it's happening, but until they get a deal done, something to keep an eye on. And they want to make sure they keep their attendance nice and high in the meantime. So that's the other challenge with the Ja Morant thing, because Ja does put butts in seats, and that's what they're going to need. So if you're going to make a trade and you're going to send Ja Morant out, you need to get back players that are going to help you and that the community is going to latch on to the way they have latched on to Ja Morant. Would be a tricky situation for sure for the Grizz to navigate. That's why I don't see them doing anything anytime soon, but I do think that it's going to need to happen sooner rather than later. Okay, could the Kings really do this? Could the Sacramento Kings go add the guy who I think may be one of the worst fits for their roster, but maybe long-term they can turn it into something? Let's take a look at what the Kings can offer in just 1 minute. Be right back. Ever hear the Sleeper app? Here's a little secret. It's more than just a platform for season-long fantasy leagues. This year, millions of users enjoyed playing fantasy sports on Sleeper, but the app offers so much more. Live stats, real-time updates, and visualizations on all stats. A news feed. This is so important for me. You can get lightning-fast updates on your favorite players and teams. A real-time chat to allow you to engage with other users about individual plays and performances during the NFL and NBA seasons. So download the #1 sports app today. Experience it for yourself. When you use promo code Bulletin, you get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. Check out Sleeper today. And by the way, they do have a phenomenal promo going on right now as well. Free $20 entry. Go check that out. No deposit required. $20 entry for free. Go check them out. Use the link in the description down below, and that promo code is Bulletin. All right, so the Sacramento Kings, the other team that Sam Amick mentioned that are interested in Ja Morant, because of course they are. The rumors being that they could send back a point guard in that situation. Okay, here we go. Ja Morant to the Kings. The Kings can make it happen. Now, by the way, the Wolves are a team that's just below the second apron, so they got to be careful there. The Kings are a first apron squad, and so that is a little bit of a challenge for them, just in terms of sending out enough salary and not without taking back too much. So if we look at Sacramento, they are hard capped at the first apron, but $7.6 million below it, so that does help. But here's what I put together. DeMar DeRozan, not fully guaranteed for next year, so maybe a little bit of flexibility there. And then Dennis Schroeder. If you want to continue winning right now, and you've got a European coach who plays a very European style, I could see the appeal of going and getting a guy like Dennis Schroeder. If you are the Kings, who very much needs star power, lost De'Aaron Fox, could Ja Morant step into that role? Now, do I like Ja Morant, Zach LaVine, Sabonis? No, as a grouping for the no. But if you were to add in, I guess, a healthy Keegan Murray, heal up soon Keegan, and then Keon Ellis, okay, maybe you're getting a little closer to something there in Sacramento. So would you do something like this? DeMar DeRozan, Dennis Schroeder, who both probably not long-term fits, in Sacramento, just based on age, nothing more. DeRozan obviously really getting up there, and I don't think he's a fit presently or long term. But Dennis Schroeder is a guard that I like. I think he's good. Is he a needle mover? Not necessarily. He's great when he's playing international ball, the Eurobasket MVP. But Schroeder could be a guy who can come to Memphis, has that right mentality, grit and grind, all that kind of stuff, and can run Isolo's system. Now, I've also got a couple of first-round picks going in there because when we compare that to the Wolves deal, I think Randall and DiVincenzo are much more valuable than DeRozan and Dennis Schroeder. You're not going to get a whole lot there, player-wise value. So we got a couple of first-round picks. So if you're Memphis, you already turned Des Bane into picks. You get DeMar DeRozan, who is at least only partially guaranteed for next year, has some interesting guarantee language in his contract. And then you've got Dennis Schroeder coming in that's on a deal that's a 2-year deal, so you'd still have him for next year as well, plus getting Sacramento's first-round pick this year. And then I threw in the Minnesota first in 2031. Now, does that project to be great? Well, not with Anthony Edwards still being young, but it's a future asset that you pick up if you're Memphis. If you're Sacramento, is this worth it? Maybe if you think Ja is that guy and you're going to run Ja's system and he's going to be your star for the future, maybe. I still don't like the pairing in Memphis, the way the whole thing, or in Sacramento, the way it's all set up. Not a big fan of it in general, but I could see Sacramento just saying we need star power and going and getting Ja. Is this going to keep butts in seats in Memphis? Probably not. But if the Grizzlies start winning, and they might with Dennis Schroeder, and if they can turn all this draft capital that they would have now acquired between the Desmond Bane trade and this trade with Ja Morant, if they can turn that into another good piece or two, I think Cedric Coward is already a really nice fit in Memphis. They've got some guys there, build around a team with Jaren Jackson Jr. and then the right fitting guys, and then hope that Coward turns into something, get Zach Edey back and healthy, get Brandon Clark back and healthy. Maybe they become that kind of plucky team that is able to catch some teams by surprise. But the big thing here is you're getting draft capital, and especially getting a 2026 Sacramento pick. You hope that things continue to blow up in Sacramento, and then boom, maybe you have a nice high pick in what is expected to be a very loaded draft class. So do I like either of these trades? No. And frankly, if I'm Memphis, maybe I have conversations with the Kings. If I could find some way to get Nick Clifford into this deal, I'd be very interested in that if I'm Memphis. If I could find some way to get Keon Ellis into this deal, I'd be very interested in that. If I'm Memphis, I think those are two guys that would fit with Memphis long term and can really give them something to build with moving forward. So if I could do something like that, like if I'm getting a couple of firsts, Dennis Schroeder and DeMar DeRozan, is that enough for Memphis? I don't know, to give up their guy and maybe give up their shot, but at winning games this year, because again, we're still early in the season. But if you can get a Keon Ellis added in that fits the vibe of Memphis perfectly, what they need, Nick Clifford, I think, then have Nick Clifford and Cedric Coward, and then maybe be really cooking in a year or so. That to me is interesting. I don't know if Sacramento would do it, but again, it's interesting because Ja Morant is such an eye of the beholder type guy. What team sees him as a star? If a team sees him as a star, and that's what he is, then they might be willing to give up something like that. Maybe it's one pick and Nick Clifford. One pick, DeMar DeRozan, Dennis Schroeder, and Keon Ellis. And off you go. And they get something done. I don't love it for the Kings. I don't think it's the right move for them to make. I think they need to burn it down and rebuild. But there you have it. If Sacramento says, we want Ja Morant to replace De'Aaron Fox, maybe that's something they can do. By the way, Dennis Schroeder, like the Wolves guys, not trade eligible currently. This would be a after December 15th trade. Of course, there are other pieces, not DeMar DeRozan, that they could try to put in. I'm sure the Grizz would ask for Keegan Murray. The Kings would say no, and back and forth we go there. But there's a couple of trades. I don't think either are likely. I don't personally think that, I don't think the Kings should trade for Ja Morant, just conceptually. I don't know that the Wolves have the right pieces to put together to make a Ja Morant trade make sense for them. Frankly, I wouldn't give up Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo to get Ja Morant, but just making the math work, it's kind of where you're at. If it's Rudy Gobert, I'm kind of down on him. So maybe you're willing to do something like that. But then if you're Memphis, do you even want to take on Rudy Gobert? And then you have Rudy Gobert and Zach Edey. And then what do you do from that? It's very messy trying to trade Ja to either team. But what we do know right now, according to Sam Amick, both the Kings and the Wolves keeping a very close eye on the Ja Morant situation and could wind up being bidders on him ahead of this year's trade deadline. So let me know, everybody. What do you think? Would either side do those moves in the deals I presented? And what tweaks would you make to those trades in order to get Ja to either Minnesota or to Sacramento? Give me your thoughts in the comments down below. Till next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.